We come together for a moment out of time in a place made holy by our presence, to celebrate what is deepest and most true, to honor the beauty of our own heart's longing, to cultivate wonder, imagination, and the courage to act, and to care for one another. Please light your chalice. Our common chalice is now lit.
Come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of disbelieving, ours is no yet again of despair. Come yet again, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of disbelieving, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan, whoever is leaving, ours is no caravan, whoever is leaving, ours is no caravan of disbelieving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come.
Welcome to this time of reflection, this time of a deeper breath, deeper honesty, connection to others. Welcome to worship. Tonight we are one of 200 or more Unitarian Universalist congregations who are focusing on white supremacy. This is the second time that Unitarian Universalist congregations have come together in focused time to do this. I think you know that white supremacy is always part of what we're talking about here. And I get emails sometimes from people who say, you know, why do you want to keep talking about that? So I just want to spend a moment sharing with you why I do and why we do as Unitarian Universalists focus on white supremacy. We have unique principles that bring us together as Unitarian Universalists. One is that we are all connected to one another, that whatever befalls one group befalls us all because we're part of an interdependent web. Also, we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and we struggle to bring beloved community into the world, peace, liberty, and justice for all. Those are some of our key religious principles. And so at this time, we do spend time examining what holds us back from living those principles. All of us raised in the United States, and I would say in the world, looking at global events transpiring, are indoctrinated into believing in white supremacy. It affects even people of color in horrible, internalized ways, and it certainly affects those of us who are white, making us less conscious than we would want to be. The writer James Baldwin said, "If I love you, I have to make you conscious of what you don't see." And James Baldwin and many other people of color over many years have brought me to more consciousness, and the more consciousness I come to myself, and I've been at this work for more than 30 years, the deeper I go into it, the more I see that white supremacy is always, always there, just always whispering in my ear, always ready to take me back, unless I am in very active resistance to us. We as a spiritual community are committed to consciousness. Sometimes, being asleep is more pleasant, but I think that we are committed to speaking the truth with love, even when the truth is a very painful truth to take in. Our theme this month is vulnerability. And one thing that sometimes happens for white people who begin to look at the painful truth about racism and about who we are as white people and what we have done to other people historically, what has happened around the world. Sometimes white people feel incredibly sad and hurt about that. And that's an important thing to know and to feel. And it is vulnerable because that sense of superiority and supremacy can make us feel a little better than we are. And when we take that away from ourselves, we do feel more vulnerable. Sometimes as we come to that awareness, it's very painful, and we do all kinds of things to either push it away or blame the people who are telling us for not telling us right, or all kinds of other things to just not have to deal with our own vulnerability in this. One of the concepts which I've appreciated being named and described is one that Robin DiAngelo, a professor in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, calls white fragility. And that is that white people feel so fragile if we are in any way implicated in racism. We just feel like our whole self will fall apart, and we do all kinds of things to just resist that. So tonight I urge you to just watch that, to just see in yourself, oh, here's where I shut down. Here's where I resist. Here's where I feel defensive. Here's where I'm saying, I didn't do that. My ancestors didn't do that. What are the voices that come up for you to push away the pain of this consciousness? And in allowing ourselves to feel that pain, yes, we're more vulnerable, but we are so much more human. We become, in a way, part of humanity by seeing that whole truth. And so tonight, I invite you to really understand the difference between fragility and vulnerability. White people are not fragile. We have been trained to believe that our egos are fragile, that they're dependent on our belief that we are superior. We're not. We're not superior, and we're not fragile. So I invite you tonight to watch yourself, to see. And one time when we were doing our weekly talk show, The View, Leslie Mack, who is one of the founders of Black Lives, of Unitarian Universalist, said something so helpful. She said, when I feel myself getting defensive, and she was talking about around transgender issues, I know that that's a wake-up call for me. I know that that's when I need to pay more attention. That's when I need to say, oh, there's something for me to learn here. So I invite you to think about a bigger consciousness as part of who we're called to be as Unitarian Universalists. And I invite you to partake fully this evening. Come, let us worship together.
Let us now pause for a moment of deepening together as a community, for we each carry within us joys that are too great for one heart to hold, sorrows that are too much for one heart to endure, local and world events which call upon us to bear witness. Let us begin by recalling the joys, whatever you may be celebrating or whatever evokes a feeling of happiness or peace for you or for others. Now let us recall our concerns and sorrows, whatever you or the world may be holding that is in need of our healing and caring thoughts. In the heart of love and in the spirit of prayer, we give thanks for this time together, where joys can be magnified and sorrows can be lessened. Blessed be.
I invite you now to a time of prayer, reflection, deep honesty, a deep breath. I invite you to really give yourself the gift of a few moments, to take your hands away from the keyboard, to close your eyes if you like to do that, to breathe deeply, and to allow yourself to be present, to be fully present with all that you are, with every part of yourself, to know yourself, to sit in the deep truth of your broken heart, of your whole heart. There is so much that breaks our heart every day. And it can be a struggle sometimes to want to keep opening when more pain keeps coming in. But resisting the pain actually increases it. So I invite you now to just really allow yourself to be with the complex truth of the beauty and the profound brokenness of our planet. For all of those people who are living with dramatic weather, whether it be the people in Puerto Rico who are still without drinking water, still without crucial medicines to survive, we are holding you in our hearts and we are affirming our connection to you. For all of those people in Mexico recovering from a dramatic earthquake, for those in Texas and Florida recovering from hurricanes and floods, and all of the island communities who are vulnerable with global climate change, including some of the communities that have been hit recently through the hurricanes. We lift up the people in California who are fleeing burning houses, for all of the Unitarian Universalists who have lost their houses, for the churches that have sustained damage, and for all the people, especially the most vulnerable people in California, as they labor to breathe. We lift up all of those who are incarcerated, especially the 823 Church of the Larger Fellowship members who are currently incarcerated. May they find a wind to bring even a moment of freedom, of creativity, of imagination into their cells. We lift up all of those struggling with the prisons of addiction, abuse, all of those who fear economic hardship, all of those terrified by the changes being made in healthcare and the recklessness with which they are regarding human life. We lift up that every person, whether we know them or not, is precious. Whether we can see them or not, they are connected to us. And we rest in that connection. We know that every small act of kindness and care that we make, whether for children, elders, sick people, politically oppressed people, all of the people with whom we lend our heart and reach out, whether with money to support them, whether with care, a meal, a ride, companionship, that all matters. That is also huge. We can't see it, but it is ever present, that care that undergirds all of our lives. None of us would be here today without thousands of acts of caring. And so may we care for the vulnerable, honor our own vulnerability, and find respite here in this community, in words and songs that we love, with people and animals that we love, with the earth herself. May we know that we are blessed. Amen.
I am that I am. I am male. I am cisgender. I am queer. I am Christian. I am young-ish. I am a musician. I am black. Of these, there is nothing that you notice more than that I am black. Although that I am male might come close. There's nothing that excites you more than that I am black. Although that I am queer might come close. There is nothing that you are more fearful of than that I am black. Although that I am Christian might come close. I don't say any of this with any shame. I love my blackness. The idea that blackness has been resilient enough to survive whiteness generation after generation, century after century, is enough to make me want to flaunt my blackness loudly and proudly. That is, unless there is any tax-funded badge-bearing firearm nearby. No, I love my blackness, but I am aware of it constantly. I am aware even of your whiteness responding to it constantly. I am aware even in this moment that whiteness is urging some of you to figure out how you will pin me down after the service to tell me that I am wrong about you. I love my blackness, but I am aware that it has been diluted by a need to move more easily throughout the white life I have built around myself. Yes, my blackness has been diluted in certain ways so that I can move more easily. More easily, that is, for you. The music that the choir will sing this morning is challenging for me. It was challenging for me when I reluctantly chose it last November to pair with the original sermon topic, which was Peace Like a River. And it is even more challenging for me now. The song Peace Like a River is a Negro spiritual that white people turned into a children's song because of how easily it lends itself toward added verses and silly hand movements. But it is a spiritual out of the American slavery era, rather, the American slavery tradition, that talks about how black slaves needed to put up a front before their white oppressors for fear that expressing their true emotions would have dire or even fatal results. You see, rivers look peaceful from the land, but they are extremely busy and often violent under the surface. Peace, like a river, is about showing peace and feeling rage. Mac Wilberg is a white Mormon arranger who has set this piece absolutely beautifully, but in a way that clearly demonstrates he doesn't get it. And in Come in Peace is extraordinarily well written and really fun to sing. However, it is written by a white Canadian man, Brian Tate, who has made his entire living by imitating black and brown music for white use. I fully realized that programming this music was my choice. But I also realized that I could easily hide, knowing that you wouldn't have known any of this if I didn't tell you. Further, part of my job is to spend your money tangled in white expressions of fear and scarcity mentality very carefully. And sometimes that means choosing the piece that is already in the library over purchasing something more ethically secure. Indeed, you did just hear me suggest that a common function of whiteness is choosing financial security over ethical security. Now, none of this should discourage you from enjoying the music this morning. Again, it has been skillfully crafted, and the chalice choir has worked very hard to prepare it so that it might bring added meaning to your worship. However, when I enter this white space, these are the sorts of things I get to sit with and wrestle with, while most of you are able to sit and remain oblivious, and contently so. When you ask me what white privilege is, I would say it is this power you have to not notice. When you ask me what white supremacy is, I would say it is this power that you have to be angry when I notice. Just a few more weary days and then I'll fly away to a home where joy shall never end. I'll fly away. Oh, I'll fly away. Oh, glory, I'll fly away in the morning when I die. Hallelujah, by and by. Oh, I'll fly away.
I'm really pleased to participate in this second white supremacy teach-in. It's important to me for many reasons. First of all, I know that we can't stop taking a deeper look into our denomination and our systems of white supremacy that are built within it. But I also need the opportunity to take a deeper look into myself. I have a lot at stake here. I'm a parent of 6 children of color, and in that situation, sometimes I even forget my whiteness, even though it's in front of my face every day. But the first time I really recognized who I was as a white person was when I was a child growing up in southern Ohio. I lived in a farming community where most of the folks who didn't farm anymore were working class factory workers, like my dad. And in that community, there simply were no people of color. And I'm not exaggerating. The first time I ever saw a person of color was on a trip to Mexico when I was 4 years old. And on that trip, my parents bought me a doll. and I brought it back to Southern Ohio, back to that white community. And I think I was probably one of the only kids in Southern Ohio who had a brown baby doll. And, you know, even today, looking for baby dolls for my children, it's not an easy thing to come by. It's much easier to find a baby that is blonde-haired and blue-eyed. It's the norm on the shelves in the store. So I'm carrying this brown baby doll around Southern Ohio in this white community, and I'm sure that I got a look or two for this. But what was most jarring to me was when I showed it to this man who I had a crush on. This man who used to tell me that when I grew up he was going to marry me. And I said, "Look at my baby, isn't it cute?" And he looked me in the eye and he said, "I can't marry you anymore. I can't have any black babies." And he didn't say black, by the way. You can imagine what he said. But all of a sudden, I was washed over with this sense of difference and understanding that people were different and people were judging each other on their skin color and using that as a platform for hate. Another situation I'm reminded of is raising my children. And in raising my children, it was always really important to me that we lift up their culture and expose them to as much of their culture of their birth parents as possible. So our two oldest sons are from Puerto Rico, so we celebrated by cooking Puerto Rican food. I had made sure that we had friends that were Puerto Rican so that they could be around people and learn Spanish in that dialect. And I was doing all this stuff to just really embrace their culture. And with our younger children who had roots in Mexico, I was doing the same thing. I was just focusing on Mexican culture and really trying to immerse them in that. And one day my son said to me, "Mom, how does it feel to be the only white people in this family, you and Dad?" And I was really shocked and shaken by that, because until that point, I had focused so much on their culture and who they were. I had really become patronizing. I'd really created myself as the norm and them as something different, something romantic, something to celebrate their differences, which are important, but I have culture too. As I mentioned, I grew up in Southern Ohio farming community in the most northern part of Appalachia, and there was all kinds of important cultural parts of my life that I could have shared with my children, and I simply didn't because I was so focused on me being the norm and them being something unique. I've also learned from my children that my whiteness can be a tool, not purposefully, but one time one of our kids got in a lot of trouble and the police came to our house. And when the police knocked on the door, they weren't expecting white people to answer the door. And when the white people answered the door, my son was treated so much differently, and he had really done something pretty bad. And instead of handcuffing him, they put him in the police cruiser and they drove him to the police station. And they questioned him, and during the questioning, they called my husband and I and gave us updates on what was going on. And then finally, they brought him back home. They didn't make us come and get him or anything. And I'd love to think that that's the policy of the police department where I live in Montgomery, Alabama, but I know that that's white supremacy and our whiteness putting pressure on the police to behave a certain way around our child. Another child of color who had been arrested would not have been treated the same way. It was a jarring situation to go through in the first place, and we were terribly worried that he was going to get hurt. But to figure out that our whiteness protected him was a real wake-up call for me. Like the wake-up call of being asked, how does it feel to be the only white people in this family? Or the wake-up call of understanding that racism existed in Southern Ohio, where white was the norm. I want to give you a minute to think about that. When did you first recognize that the color of your skin impacted the world around you? I think it's pretty unusual for me to figure out that that happened at a young age of 4. And I keep learning it over and over again. I keep remembering that I have advantages and that it's my job to use those advantages to help disrupt systems of white supremacy. And I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to learn over and over again about my whiteness. And there's never one time where I'll finally learn to embrace who I am and not benefit from systems of white supremacy. There's not going to be a time when I can do that if I don't open my eyes and continue learning and continue making mistakes. So I invite you to join me in learning about who you are and learning about how who you are impacts systems of white supremacy. I invite you to make mistakes along with me and learn over and over again, sometimes the hard way, what it means to be the person you are and how to use that to disrupt systems of white supremacy in the areas where you live. Be gentle with yourself as you make these mistakes. Take good care, and blessed be.
And now we come to that time in our service when we extinguish the flames that we've lit for this special time set apart. But never do we extinguish the flame that burns eternal. The flame of love, the flame of our commitment to a just and caring world. If you carry that flame, please touch your heart and say to yourself, I carry the flame, and allow that flame to burn bright.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, yeah, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Hey, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I got the light of peace and love, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, I got the light of peace and love, I'm gonna let it shine. Yeah, I got the light of peace and love, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All in my home, I'm gonna let it shine. Yeah, all in my home, I'm gonna let it shine. All in my home, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I got the light of freedom, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, the light of freedom, I'm gonna let it shine. Yeah, I got the light of freedom, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Shine, 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 just let it shine. Yeah, shine, 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 just let it shine. Yeah, shine, 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 just let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Yeah, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Yeah, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine.
Three.